Institute Power Up session, Leading Virtual Teams. This is Randy Mislovic, Managing Director of the RMI. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We do these sessions every quarter on a particular topic. At the end of the session, I'm going to ask for people to submit if you have ideas on sessions that you'd like to submit for future session ideas. But again, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. I want to do a brief reminder about the Institute, as there's some new names joining us today. The Institute, the Resource Management Institute, is dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management, and we do that through capturing best practices, standards, thought leadership, and we've built many of those things into our certification program for those of you who are resource management certified professionals who are joining us today. This is the community we are building for people in the resource management discipline and profession. So we have a website for those of you who haven't been there, resourcemanagementinstitute.com. I hope you'll go there and check us out. The Institute provides opportunities for you to communicate and collaborate with your resource management peers wherever they may be around the globe. We've got some great social tools to help you do that. For those of you who've been to the certification program, we've got a great portal for people who want to participate, who have finished our certification program, who then get access to a toolkit to do their jobs better. And then certainly we have the opportunity for people to come to educate yourself. And that education can be not only through our resource management certification program, but we've got lots of white papers and opportunities like these Power Up sessions to learn more about your discipline and profession. So best of all about the Institute is in the upper right-hand corner there you see on the slide is that joining the RMI is free. And so I hope that if you're new to this, you'll join us and participate with the community. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for the day today. The topic of virtual teams is I've had a few people ask me, what's that got to do with resource management? Well, it has a lot to do with resource management for those of you who run RMOs or who are resource managers, as many of our RMOs operate with remote members and operate virtually. Many of the resources that those RMOs or resource managers work with are located remotely. And so all of us building better skills at how do we do a better job of building and maintaining and running, leading virtual teams is a skill set that can help us as resource managers in our disciplines. So we, as for this Power Up session, went out to find the best of the best who knows a whole lot about this topic. And as I'm delighted to introduce today Susan Gerke, President of Gerke Consulting. Susan's joining us this morning from Southern California, where she's lived and worked for quite some time. She spent 21 years at IBM, which is where I first met Susan. Since 1989, she's been involved in designing, customizing, and implementing various leadership and teamwork programs, including the time while she was at IBM and then starting her new company, Gerke Consulting. She's a recognized expert on teaming, and she's a co-developer of the groundbreaking Go Team learning curriculum. She's also co-author of the following numerous works. I won't read each of those. I will affectionately remember. I remember when Susan wrote this quick guide to interaction styles. She sent it to me in the mail. I read it. I still have it on my desk at the office. It's still very relevant today as it was then. And so anyway, I am just super pleased to have Susan Gerke here to talk to us about this topic of leading virtual teams. So Susan, with that, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Randy, and thank you all for being here today. I hope you'll find this next half hour worthwhile for you. I think the topic's very relevant, as Randy has just shared with you. It may be odd for the first slide to ask the question, what is virtual? And you'll find I'll use the word virtual and remote interchangeably. I think it's obvious when you're working with somebody in a different country or a different city that you have a virtual or remote relationship. But for some of you, you may even be in a campus type of setting where there's multiple buildings. If somebody's in a different building from you, you might as well be, miles away. You're probably operating virtually. And it turns out even if you're on a different floor in the same building, you might be using different stairwells, you are coming and going at different times, you aren't just casually running into each other. So you very well may have a virtual or remote relationship. Certainly if you're telecommuting, working from home, that kind of thing, we know that's remote as well. And if you or people who you're working with travel a great deal, then you probably actually have a remote relationship, even if your offices are right next to each other, because the odds that you're there at the same time or that you can have, impromptu conversations are very low. So all of these actually are virtual. And the one that I haven't listed here is if you're working with people who are working on different shifts. That makes a difference as well. Some good information that I found that I just love this, what this says, because I think it's the core of why we're here for this session. The probability that two people will collaborate is 3 times more likely for people sitting next to each other than if they're just 30 feet apart. 30 feet is not very far down the hallway, right? And if we're 90 feet apart, collaboration is as likely as if we're miles apart. Well, if you've got a team that you want to have working together and they're not in close proximity, then that says they may not be collaborating, which is exactly what you need them to do. And so we're going to spend some energy today trying to understand a little bit more about what those specific challenges are when people are not right next to each other. And then I'll bring you some tips for how to get those teams working together better. So let's just look at, I'm going to look at 2 pieces today. We'll look at when we're leading virtually, as well as just when we're a member of a virtual team or leading the team, because I think the one-on-one work is as important to recognize as the one-on-many. And so when we are trying to lead virtually, it really is more difficult to build relationships and trust with those people who are in a different location from us. When we're in the same location, we run into each other at the copier or getting a cup of coffee, or I walk past your desk and I see a picture of a puppy or a baby or something, and I stop and ask, and we get into these casual conversations and get to know each other, something about each other outside of work because of that casual interaction. That doesn't happen when we're virtual. The communication is how it all happens, and when we're trying to communicate remotely, it tends to be more complex and can very easily result in miscommunication. There's no body language unless we're using really great video and everybody's on it and we're paying attention, but we don't do that very often. And email, not only is there no body language, but there's no tone of voice that comes through either. And so we lose a lot in the translation when we're communicating, never mind texting and other shorthand kinds of communication. We know there are a variety of personalities in this world, and trying to recognize those, learn about those, takes longer when I don't see you and get to know you in a casual kind of a way. And then it takes extra energy to try and remember to make space for your style and difference. And then when I'm trying to lead team members, I had a team of 10. We were no 2 in the same location, spread from Southern California to London. I tell you, keeping everybody motivated, keeping everybody connected to what our organizational goals were, it was just tough. You get a little bit of the out of sight, out of mind thing happening sometimes, not intentionally, but we can get pretty busy, and so that gets in the way as well. When we look at virtual team challenges, the reality is it's sometimes easier to just do something myself than to coordinate working with somebody else. It takes extra work to connect with other people. We've got to set up things and so on. Time zones, if you're dealing with those, absolutely can make it difficult. If you're just operating here in the US, that's just a 3-hour difference. But, if you're working with Europe or Asia, suddenly trying to figure out when to connect with everybody is very tough. And one of the things we have to do is learn to share the pain. You don't always want to have the same person be the one in, at midnight or at 4:30 in the morning connecting into the call. So we've got to figure out how to help everybody share that pain. Conflict is an expectation that you're going to have when people are trying to work together. You're going to run into difficulties. The problem is, by the time we recognize we've got real conflicts virtually, it's often a bigger issue or further down the road by the time you actually identify it. So that becomes a real challenge, particularly when you're trying to lead your team. And then finally, I think keeping a team unified and focused when we're in this ever-changing world, it's not static. And so trying to make sure everybody's got the latest information and is, current and on the same page, very, very tough. So I have 4 key elements for leading virtual teams. One is we have to clarify our goals, whether it's for the organizational goals, whether it's project goals, whether it's just a meeting that we're having today. Be really clear about purpose and goals. But we also one of the key things that disrupt any team is lack of clarity of roles, virtual or not. And so, yes, we've got a new project. Here's who's doing what. Here's what everybody's role is. But also when we're in meetings, who's the one who always takes the notes, and are they always willing to do that? Or who's the one who will be sure that everybody's being included? I mean, there are roles that people play, and we need to be a little more overt about what those are in our virtual teams. We need to talk about our processes. I have in my head, when I say the XYZ process, I know the way I've always done that. But, I'm in California, you're in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, the XYZ process has always been done a slightly different way. So we got to talk about that stuff, or we're going in different directions without knowing it. And then finally, a super critical element for leading virtual teams is to build relationships. It's foundational for working together remotely or virtually. And so that's where we're going to spend a little bit of our meat here, if you will, today. I want to spend time on when you're leading individuals, how do you do some relationship building? And I want to spend some time on when you're leading teams, how do you do relationship building? So starting with leading individuals. So, you've got somebody who's in another location from you. What are the things you do to help them, to help your relationship? And one of them is to actually spend a little bit of time engaging in small talk. Even Randy and Thomas and I got on early today, ahead of you all, to just make sure everything was organized and we knew what we were doing and so on. But we had a few minutes to just chit-chat a little bit, so we checked in on the weather and where each of us was, and a little bit about what's going on in our lives, even just it was a couple of minutes. But it connects us to each other. And so find those couple of minutes. There's just a sense when we're on the phone that we have to use that all for business time, and then we have to be done. And really a couple of minutes of, hey, how was your weekend? Or, what's going on exciting in your life? Kind of thing can make a big difference. One of the ways I found it that I did it most when I was leading my virtual team is I used the virtual cup of coffee. And what this is it's a technique. I would call any of my folks on the phone and I'd say, hey, Joe, this is Susan. I'm calling for a virtual cup of coffee. And everybody in my team knew when I called for a virtual cup of coffee that I was really just calling to say hi. No agenda, no to-dos, none of that. And it was just the same as if we'd been in the office together and I would swing by your desk and say, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Well, this is the same idea. And part of it was important is because they knew they could say, if they were really busy, say, oh, this is not a good time for me, Susan, to have a virtual cup of coffee. I'd say, okay, great, I'll call you another time. Or if we knew we had something we wanted to talk about, we'd schedule something. But it was a wonderful way to spend 5 minutes catching up with what was going on in my people's lives. And so you might find the virtual cup of coffee to be a good tool for you. Another way to keep those relationships going is to send personal handwritten notes. Now, I know that sounds very old-fashioned, but guess what? People keep those things. Keep a stack of note cards in your desk, know what everybody's address is, and keep some stamps. Have all the tools so that you say, you know what? Susie just did this great thing. I'm going to dash off a little note to her, thank her for the extra time and energy she put in to make that all come through, and pop it in the mail to her. Besides that individual seeing that note, odds are their family will see it as well. And so brings a sense of pride to them. So think about, can you do that for people? Use video when you have the opportunity. You know, it's built into all of our computers. So have the video show. You know, I got people I talk to, I don't even know what they look like. And if I could use video, it somehow makes a difference. Take time to learn the best way to reach each of the individuals that you work with, whether they report to you directly or they're, you know, in your matrix, or they're just people who you need to be successful. You know, some people prefer you call them on the cell. Some would rather have an email. Others like text. Everybody's different. And particularly for people you're leading, what's the best time? You know, I'm a morning person. You can call me early and I'm happy to chat with you. I know other people don't call them before 10 or before their third cup of coffee. And so if you reach out to find out how do people like to be connected with and when's good time for them, that says I care about you and I want to know more about you and work with you. And maybe you just schedule a call about how we're going to work together. You know, how are we going to keep each other updated about projects? How are we going to reach out when we've got concerns? How are we going to, you know, whatever you need to do, just talk about that stuff together. These days, learn about cultural differences. It doesn't even matter if you're working with people who aren't outside the U.S. We have a huge cultural diversity right here living within our country. And learn about their cultural differences. Sometimes there's holidays. I don't know what that holiday means. So how tell you about the holiday and why it exists. Or, you know, as we talk together, work together, we do things in different ways and don't always know there's a cultural overlay there. So the more we can learn about each other, the better we'll work together. And then another one I think is always helpful is disclose something personal. If I will share first with my folks about a mistake I made or something fun that's going on in my life, or hey, I got a new puppy, or I got a new car, or I got a this, or I'm doing that, then it opens up other individuals and they're more willing to share with you as well. So those are just some tips for leading people who are virtual, just individuals who are virtual. And then relationship building for teams. So get the whole team together on conference calls on a regular basis. And they don't have to be an hour long. Have a 30-minute call. It's amazing what we can do in 30 minutes. Pull them all together and then share some things about what people are excited about that they accomplished, or what challenges they're having, or what their best practices are. Particularly if you've got smaller groups, 4 to 6 people, go around and have everybody. Maybe this week we all share the biggest challenge on our plate this week. Maybe next week we all share one thing we're grateful for that somebody else on the team did. So we could just start those calls with a little something each time that is not just the project itself. Another way to get some team stuff going is put small groups, 2s or 3s, of people who are all virtual from each other on special projects or work together, and they'll get to know each other by getting work done together. So don't always say, well, these 3 are located together, so let's have them work on this project, and those 3 people are in another location, let's have them work. Spread it around and they'll get to know each other, and they'll learn how to work virtually even better. Create some team operating guidelines together. Have one of your conference calls be to talk about how are we working together. And it'll be things like we listen to one another, we're going to reach out when we have issues, we're going to meet all our deadlines. So how is the group going to agree to operate? We often do that for our co-located teams, and we don't think about the importance of doing it for our virtual teams. Learn about each other's personalities. There are a ton of tools out there. There's brain styles, there's communication styles, there's personality styles, there's DISC, social styles. There are many, many tools. Strength Finder's another one. So find some common tool, have everybody do their assessment, and then share with each other what's unique, and then learn how to make space for each other, whether that's the quiet person. We need to give them time to think about things before they want to express what their opinion is, versus the talkative ones who are like, oh, I'll just jump in and talk. So let's make space for those differences. And use common workspace. I mean virtual technical workspaces. So find a database or a tool or an app or something that lets you share information in common spaces for decision making and problem solving. And then take some time out together as a team to just talk about how are we doing and how can we improve? How are our meetings? Are we meeting often enough? How are we doing on sharing successes, etc.? So share all of those things. And so what I hope you're noticing is this takes some specific energy. And so two things. One is be deliberate about building relationships and staying connected. When I was a manager and my people were all right outside my door in a bullpen area, I could swing by and chat with each of them every day and did. And so the relationship building happened organically. Once I had people who were all remote, I had to be deliberate and specific about reaching out and making sure I was staying connected with my people. So this is about being deliberate and being more proactive, really. And then the other key thing is acknowledge that there are challenges, that it's different to be working virtually versus face-to-face. And work together to overcome the challenges. Another conference call you might have with your team is say, okay, we've been working together for 2 months now. What's the biggest challenge of the fact that we're virtual? What about being virtual is getting in the way? And then come together to figure out, say, okay, so what will we put in place so that we can get past that challenge? They feel it. If you feel it, they feel it. And so really work together to figure out how are you all going to work together to overcome those challenges. So those are the key things I wanted to share with you today. Some of that stuff probably you're saying, oh, I already do that. Yay. And others, I hope there was an idea or two there that is either something you'll try or something that you're going to think about. So, and then I know Randy wants to go to Q&A. So let's see what you guys all want to say.
Well, wonderful. So this is the Q&A section. So we got some time to take questions. There's a Q&A questions panel. You can enter your questions there, and Susan and I will try to field those questions as they come about. And Susan, I'll just going to share one that came in while you were doing your presentation. And Susan, I know you've been doing consultative work and training people on this topic for years. And of the companies you've been to, what's like, the common 1, 2, 3 biggest mistakes you see teams making that are getting in the way of effective virtual teaming? So I'm kind of taking it from the other side. You shared with us all the things you need to do, and what do you run into that's most common? And while you're answering that, hopefully some folks, let's get some more questions going here in the Q&A panel, and it's free to get a question answered here. So Susan?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So let me tell you a couple of things that often are done well. Is we often get started correctly in a team. So our virtual team, we spend a little bit of time on what's our goal and what are our roles and so on. And then so that's the forming. We often run into that natural storming and we sort through that, and then we get complacent in virtual teams and we say, hey, we have this thing going. We don't need those weekly meetings after all. Or, somebody new added to the team, they'll catch up okay. And so where we fall down is starting to make assumptions that because it worked okay a little bit before, it'll continue to work going forward. And so don't let go of that regular check-in and making sure everybody's on the same page. I think that's probably the biggest one I've seen.
Okay, terrific. So the what would be another question was what would be a goal in virtual teaming if you said, okay, I want to get from wherever we are to a better virtual teaming environment? What's the, as organizations think about maturing their organization in this respect, what's a good goal or two that an organization could put forward? I think that's the essence of the question I see here.
So let me check. A goal about virtual teaming in general, or a specific team and what they might do, what kind of goals they might set?
Yeah. So let's say it's an individual team, because it doesn't really say in the panel here. So what does a if I was a manager and I got 20 people and I'm trying to get better at virtual management, what's a goal that I could set and how would I measure it in the virtual team and environment?
So one of the things that I like teams to do is altogether, everybody thinks about the best team experience they've ever had in their life, whether it was virtual or otherwise, and identify the characteristics of those teams. So maybe the characteristics were we communicated really well, we clarified all our roles, we supported each other, we had each other's backs, that kind of stuff. If everybody thinks that through and then together in a collaborative conversation create a list like that, and then the whole team looks at that list and says, okay, that's what we could have, because that's what a great team looks like. Then what's one or two things that we want to do as a team to move ourselves forward towards that? So it's creating a picture of what excellence and success can look like, and then together deciding what do we want to do to move towards that. That's one way you might do it.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Another question is, how do you handle staff who don't work well virtually?
Oh, that's always an interesting question. So one of the questions is are they, so one piece of that is somebody is virtual because they're working from home or wherever they want to, when they're not good at compartmentalizing and keeping the rest of their life from invading. So that's one issue. And as a leader, if you're going to invite people to have the opportunity to work from home or wherever they want, it's nice if you can set that up on a pilot basis and then check in and see, is this working for you? Is this working for me? And if it's not, then pilot's over. You have to come back into the office. The other one is then you're going to have to do just some very specific coaching with that person. Let's identify how they're being successful virtually, and what are the areas that they're not being successful. Is it that they're not showing up for conference calls? Is it they aren't getting their work done? Is it what's the issue? And then just like we have to deal with it when we're face to face, we need to have regular set goals, have regular meetings and follow-up to be sure that they're coming through. Yep.
Okay, so here's another question for you. When you say virtual workspace for decision-making and problem solving, do you mean a collaborative space to discuss the issue and resolve as a team?
Yeah, so there are so many, depending on what kind of platforms you have, what software you might use that for could be a variety. But for example, one of my teams that I was on, we had a virtual workspace. So it was a place we could all log into. So rather than communicating via email, we would put stuff in this database, and we had categories. And so there would be a section about a conference we had coming up. There would be a section about this other project, and we could go in there and pose questions to each other, but also post resources, answers. So we had actual discussions and made decisions without ever getting on the phone together. So we used that electronic space, which can be particularly helpful when there's broad time zone issues.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Here's another question. What's the maximum team size you feel can be successfully implemented without being overloaded to do this?
So here's the challenge. If you go way back to the early 90s, Katzenbach and Smith wrote a book called The Wisdom of Teams, and their research showed that 5 to 7 is the sweet spot for any team. And I continually ask people in my leadership classes and team and classes and so on what they think the best size, optimum size, and it keeps coming up, that kind of 5 to 7 is the optimum size. Now, the reality is the project you have or the work you're doing might have 15 or 20 or 25 people on it. And then you might want to look at what are the sub-teams and operate within sub-teams. Maybe we bring everybody together on a call once a month and it's just a quick information dump. But then the teams really working together and doing real work together might be sub-teams that are smaller than that. You get too big and the communication is just nearly impossible.
Okay, wonderful. I wanted to share one thing that came into the Q&A panel from someone who apparently has now left the broadcast, but he said, I had a good experience with the daily short team call in the morning where everybody, a group of 4 or 5, reported on the weather in the morning, and we ended the call with a motto for the day. So in the end, there was a little effort from everyone finding the motto of the day as a way to kind of bring people together. So that's almost kind of like the virtual coffee idea in some respects. Cool. So I thought I'd just share that. Yep. One of these questions is, one of the challenges I've always had is celebrating successes virtually. Easy in the office, with the party, but virtually more difficult. Any thoughts there?
send them all a $5 Starbucks card, or have everybody come together at the same time and bring their favorite treat to the conference call, and then everybody goes around and says, hey, I brought a donut, or I brought a bag of carrots or whatever. So, and have them get creative. Ask them about what they'd like to do, what might be some creative ways to celebrate. They'll surprise you.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're at the end of our time here. Susan, I want to do two things. Let me just remind people that we've got two upcoming programs for the RMCP certification program, one in our office in Cincinnati, Ohio, coming up later this month. There's still time to get into, in July, so there's still plenty of time to get into that program for next month. That's an in-class version, and the next online version starts in August, and you can apply through the RMI website. If you have an idea for the next Power Up session, would love to get those ideas. We certainly get good ideas. We'll take good ideas from anyone we can get them from. Susan, I want to thank you for being willing to share your many years of experience in this topic. It's something we're all trying to figure out how to get better at. I can't thank you enough on behalf of the Institute for giving up some time to help us all get better at the virtual teaming.
My pleasure.
So with that, I'll call the end of day, Thomas, and I think we're at a job. Thanks everybody for joining us today for our broadcast.